Welcome back to the show. Well, another day, another royal drama, which 9 times out of 10 is caused by the Duke and Duchess of Dreary, Meghan and Harry. And joining me now to discuss all the latest royal news is commentator, columnist, composer and spokesperson for the Australian Monarchist League, Alexander Voltz. Alexander, wonderful to have you here. I'm so keen to get your take on all of this. Now, Meghan Markle, she's upset again. This time she's apparently in tears over the launch of her America Riviera orchard and her mocked jams. She's also reportedly sensitive about the fact that her luxurious California lifestyle is mocked and not admired. I mean, could she be any more out of touch?
Well, hi, Daisy. Great to be with you. I didn't know I was so many things, goodness me, but when you line them up, yes, there's quite a list there. Thanks for having me on the show. Meghan Markle, yeah, I'm so uninterested by this person these days, Daisy. I've got to tell you, she has no appeal for me. Is she making jam now, you say? My goodness me. And there's that fantastic South Park episode that my girlfriend absolutely loves, and in fact she's all over the Meghan and Harry drama. But we watched this South Park episode repeatedly, and the recurring phrase that the Duke and Duchess of Canada, or Prince and Princess of Canada, whatever they're supposed to be in South Park, chant is, "We want privacy, we want privacy." Well, as far as Meghan Markle goes, she can get all the privacy she wants from me, because I just really want absolutely nothing to do with her. I'm so sick of it. I'm just sick of it.
Oh gosh, I think very well said. I too loved that that South Park episode, and when Harry was screaming, "Hey, stop looking at me! Stop!" That sort of, I think, epitomizes exactly that Meghan and Harry and their worldwide privacy tour. And look, there's a new nightmare, isn't there, for the actual working royals, as King Charles and Prince William are reportedly furious over Meghan and Harry's unofficial royal tour of Nigeria. I mean, what kind of damage could Harry and Meghan's visit do to the palace, or do people dislike them so much that it just sort of doesn't matter?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, the last part of your question. I think that in the Western world, it probably doesn't matter so much. But in these other parts of the world, in Africa, where maybe the situation is not so well known, it could do geopolitical damage to have the Duke of Sussex and Meghan Markle, who I really at this point refuse to call the Duchess of Sussex, are masquerading as if they are royals. And an interesting question to put to the Nigerian government was, did the Nigerian government actually pay for much of this trip? I'm not sure. I don't know what the finances were. But if you've got a government paying for this tour, that would seem highly irregular to me, because they're not working royals anymore. And I think I read somewhere that Ghana could be next on their port of call list. So, if they're doing the African belt, if you like, I think they should consider what the diplomatic consequences of that could be. And I mean, put it in the King's perspective, if you like. I mean, His Majesty, for example, we know it's his intention to come to Australia. He hasn't been able to do that yet because he has a cancer diagnosis, and that in itself is frustrating the timelines of all his other plans. And then he sees this lady who took his son away from him off in Nigeria, swanning around as if she's the bee's knees. I don't buy it, and I think that they would just be better to probably stay in California and keep their privacy to themselves.
Yes, exactly. None of us care about their privacy, so if they want to be private, we'll be private. Now, we're going to step sideways to Australia, because this is an issue that you've talked about this week. There's been a stir with the National Gallery displaying a portrait of the wonderful Gina Rinehart without her permission. As you can see, it's a very unflattering portrait. It was part of a series of portraits by an Indigenous artist, and it's the most unflattering of all the portraits, quite pointedly, I think. And Mrs. Rinehart has understandably asked to have the portrait taken down, which is fair enough. You have written in defence of Mrs. Rinehart in this situation. Tell us, what's your take on this?
Well, it's an interesting situation I have written a Spectator article on this, and I better take my monarchist hat off and put my composer/artist hat on. I think that at the end of the day, I probably deep down in my heart believe that the painting should be hung, and that everyone should walk by it and say, "Gee, that's a really horrific painting, and this artist is." Clearly not a very nice guy, and the quality of his talent is in question. I probably actually deep down believe that. But and that's not to say I like the painting. I don't. I think it's ugly and repulsive. But where I take real issue with the National Gallery, I draw a bit of a nuanced perspective, is the National Gallery is basically arguing that it's artistically free to hang this painting. Basically what I just articulated. And so we should be entitled to do this. It's upholding the freedom of artists in this country. I would submit, Daisy, that this country is not artistically free. That's not been my experience as a conservative artist. I've had on pains of contracts being, threatened to be torn up, I've had to alter my artistic direction for works that I've undertaken for purely trivial reasons where someone has just inferred some ideological nonsense out of them. And, I've had to undertake reconciliation action training and all this rubbish. So I don't think artistic freedom exists. And I'll give you an example. If Gina Reinhardt had painted a caricature that was intentionally provocative and ugly of Vincent Namatjira, and let's say that Gina Reinhardt's caricature exaggerated the non-distinct feature of Vincent Namatjira, such as the colour of his skin. Let's say Gina Reinhardt turned Vincent Namatjira into a gollywog or something like that. I am sure that the National Gallery would already have issued a lengthy, lengthy apology. In fact, I'm sure the National Gallery wouldn't even have purchased the painting to begin with. That's what you've got to remember here. They've paid money. They've got a commercial interest in this. They're pushing what seems to be quite clearly an ideological agenda. And the last thing I would say on this is, how ungrateful is it that the National Gallery would treat one of its donors like this? Because Gina Reinhardt, according to the National Gallery website, donates annually up to 10 grand to them.
Wow.
And this is how they treat her. And I think that's actually reprehensible. And it just shows the height of these organisations thinking that they are answerable to no one, that they can use other people's money as they see fit. And at the end of the day, if you're not left-leaning, then you might as well pack up and go home because art isn't for you. Well, fundamentally, I refuse to believe that. And I think that what a good outcome from all of this would be if the private sector and even Mrs. Reinhardt were to take a good look at the National Gallery and they were to say, this institution is really embattled under an ideological yoke. Why don't we start our own, and why don't we commission artists who really are only interested in the quality of their art, not some ideological agenda behind it.
Absolutely. I think that is an excellent idea. I mean, it's as you say, shameful they treat Mrs. Reinhardt like that. I think, in my opinion, utterly spiteful of the artist to represent her like that. She's the most kind-hearted person, and if people only knew just how kind-hearted she was and how generous to organizations and to people that she is, well, they would certainly think twice about the type of negative public commentary that they offer about her. It's completely disgraceful. Alexander, we have probably 30 seconds left, so if you can very quickly give me your take. The Australian Republic movement is leaderless. Craig Foster has resigned, so has Nova Peris. They have had a kerfuffle over Craig's opinions on Israel. Literally in 30 seconds or less, tell me what's your take.
Well, three things. First thing, it's excellent to see the Australian Republican movement blowing itself up and finding itself in a predictably Republican mess.
Yes,
That's
indeed.
That's excellent.
Indeed.
Second thing, we can't be complacent. We need to be just remembering that, the Republicans are not going anywhere. They will they will recover from this, and we need to be ready for when they do. And the third thing is just a little comment on Nova Peris. You know, I completely agree with Nova Peris's position on Israel. That's not what I'm upset with her about. But she's said in her defence of what she's done and how she's left that I just couldn't bear Craig Foster talking about genocide when genocide didn't take place. That's effectively what she's inferred. Well, she's been talking about her own country like that for years.
Yes, that is
going
very
on
true.
Q&A and I just think Australians have been putting up with the frustrations that Nova Peris is now feeling for some time.
Oh,
So
completely.
those things, that's how I feel. But good on her for taking a principled stand.
Yes, exactly. Good on her for taking a principled stance. And I, like you, love watching the Australian Republican movement eating itself. That's always good. But yes, everyone, we must not, monarchists, we must not get complacent. Alexander Voltz, a delight as always to have you on. I can't wait to see you again soon.
Thanks, Daisy. All the best to you.